What is self-acceptance? And what's the true definition of self-acceptance from your perspective?
The simplest way I describe self-acceptance is I'm going to use I language. So speaking about myself in the I, which is something I invite all of your listeners to do as well. I am okay with myself
Mm,
right now, exactly as I am. Not only if I change certain things, only if I hit certain goals, but I'm okay with who I am, including my flaws and imperfections, as well as my talents and strengths.
interesting.
That's the
So
simplest way I describe it.
it sounds like your definition is a lot about like just being present with actually what is and accepting what is.
The primary thing is, do I judge myself or do I accept myself? That's
Mm,
really the thing to notice. And self-judgment is pervasive and can take a lot of really hidden forms. And what we find in our work and what the science of human behavior teaches us is that uh, the absence of self-acceptance, or where self-acceptance might be lower, and I'm actually judging myself knowingly or unknowingly, I will behave defensively. And those defense mechanisms and how that shows up in my behavior can look all different kinds of ways, but I am always undermining my effectiveness when I'm behaving from defensiveness. So self acceptance is the antidote that genuinely makes everything in your life easier. Everything.
so you're not talking about self-esteem. It seems like there's a huge distinction between what you're talking about with self-acceptance versus self-esteem. What do you see as the difference?
Yeah. So I think what's most important as far as the difference between self acceptance and self esteem. So self esteem is, um, how close am I to my ideal self? I'll often describe it like imagine you've got two circles, and one of the circles represents how I see myself today, and one of the circles represents my ideal self, right? The person I want to be. How much those two circles overlap will theoretically determine my self esteem, right? So, how do I feel about my self concept? How do I feel about how I see myself? Self acceptance is more nuanced, though, because pretty much everybody that I know does see a gap between who they are today and who they want to be. Almost everybody that I know has things about themselves they want to improve upon, knowledge they want to gain, skills they want to develop, just ways they want to become a better fill in the blank. Self acceptance comes down to how do I feel about the gap?
Mm.
Do I look at the gap between where I am today and where I want to be as a sign that I am inadequate, that I am not enough, that I am failing? Or do I look at that as having nothing to do with whether or not I'm enough now, but only as something that I'm really excited about pursuing? I can be completely okay with who I am today and feel super excited about the self improvement and self development that I'm headed toward. So a lot of people have this flawed way of thinking, like I have to beat myself up, I have to judge myself in order to improve myself, in order to grow. This is one of the biggest fallacies that I want every human being to understand for themselves, because actually the research is really clear. When I can be self-accepting on my growth journey, it's accelerated. I will grow faster and I will grow more when I'm growing from a place of being okay with where I am right now versus wanting to grow from a place of judging myself and feeling like I'm not enough, I'm inferior, I'm inadequate.
So it's almost like if you pursue self-esteem, it's always a moving target
Yes.
because, whatever that standard is, if you talk about it's the gap between where I'm supposed to be, it's always a moving target versus accepting who you are and where you are right now. I had a guest on the show. Her name is Laura, and she talked about also another Laura about
Okay.
about having an adventure mindset. She compared it to like if you're going to climb a mountain and where you're at right now is just in the parking lot, then you just accept and enjoy the fact that you're on the parking lot rather than feeling like, oh my gosh, I need to climb a summit. Would you concur with her perspective and
Yeah.
that whole idea of just like it's cool, I'm in the parking lot. Look how cool the parking lot is. It's so interesting. Just enjoy the parking lot for what it is instead of like, oh, I'm not at the summit.
I think it's a wonderful way to stay present. And I love that metaphor. I've used something similar Although in my example, somebody's not usually just in the parking lot. Normally they're partway up the mountain. They just don't stop long enough or often enough to like, how far have I come, right? To do that look back and see the distance that's behind them. And this is for high achieving people. I think this is incredibly common. People are so quick to undermine and devalue their accomplishments and their progress because they're hyper fixated on the gap that they see in front of them. There's a really great book by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who's a friend of mine. He wrote it with Dan Sullivan's concepts in mind, called The Gap and the Gain. And there's so much about that book that really embodies a lot of what I love about self-acceptance as a practice. And it teaches us that, especially, you know, coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, people who are out there achieving, working to make things better, they're always striving. They're hyper fixated on the gap and so missing the gains, not talking about the gains, undermining the gains. And that place of self-judgment, we're just less likely to make good decisions around our growth when we're in that place. We give ourselves this giant like emotional hurdle that we have to overcome before the growth even begins.